Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Adam Wood. Adam is a husband, father, author, and retired military leader. Over the last 20 years, he's traveled throughout the world in the military to countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, South Korea, Egypt, and Israel. He also served as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division for 5 years. During his time in the service, he learned a great deal about the human experience from those all around the United States and all over the world. He also found his faith through trials and tribulations that often were placed in his own personal life over the years. And after the birth of his son, who was born at just 25 weeks, weighing 1 pound and 4 ounces, he spent 135 days in the NICU with his wife and their son as he fought for life. And it was during this time that his faith and love for his son were tested. His son has since made a miraculous recovery, and now Adam dedicates his life to helping other families find healing through humor, faith, and heartwarming stories. He created the social media site Preemie Adventures and wrote his first book, Our Preemie Adventure. The book uses humor and fun images to convey a story of hope and bring families all across the world together. Welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. You're a unique person, and I didn't know until I talked to you in our pre-recording call how many things about your life I would be fascinated by. And I really mean that. I think it's a good example to all of us to really get to know people, keep getting to know them, keep talking to them, because everybody's story is fascinating.
Of course, yeah. Everyone's got their own unique thing that makes them them, and then that's the beautiful thing about people is that we're all very unique, and we're defined by so many different things that make us up, and a lot of that is what God puts in our way and helps us become who we're meant to be.
Yeah, and I'm sure traveling all over the world, you probably really learned that quickly.
Oh, that's definitely for sure. I got a chance to meet a lot of different people, a lot of different faiths and followings, and just different walks of life. And I think it definitely helped me quite a bit in being able to work with people, understand people, see a different perspective that maybe the average person wouldn't see, and have a better appreciation as well for the blessings and the things that I do have, because a lot of the places that you kind of mentioned, everything they don't have a lot. They're dealing with a lot of struggles. Mm-hmm. And I think seeing that and kind of helping those people and coming back and being here, I definitely have a lot bigger appreciation for just everything in my life. Where I think that unfortunately a lot of people don't have that, and they're very they can be kind of selfish. People can be very selfish, and they just think about themselves and woe is me. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people out there that don't have much. They have their faith, they have their family, and that's all they need.
You're right. I do think, unfortunately, and there's so many wonderful people in the United States, but I think because we're such a wealthy country, there's a lot of self-entitlement. And if you haven't traveled and you haven't seen what you're talking about, I've been on mission trips to third world countries, where people don't have shoes, they don't have roofs on their houses, they don't have enough food, and it's just heartbreaking. But it seems like those are the people that are so grateful for what they have, and their faith is so strong. Honestly, it really it took me back and made me really think and challenge my own way of looking at what I had to see how thankful and grateful they were.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience, and to see people that live just a simpler life, and to see that they're happy in that. And yeah, they
Yeah.
would probably like to have a few more things, but at the end of the day, their faith and family and what they bring and their culture ultimately helps them overcome so much adversity. And I think that's a big thing we kind of lose here in the US is we become very
Hmm.
just individualists, and we don't realize, the importance of family and faith and using those individuals in our lives to help us get them through those tough times. And I think, with these other places, they definitely go through a lot of adversity, and you hope and pray that, they're able to get through that adversity, and they're able to, make something, and be able to provide for their families, and have some enjoyment for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that they have this built-in community that we no longer have here. I feel like we just get in our car and drive into our garage and drive back out to work or to the drive-through place that we're getting food. Like I don't feel like there's that
Exactly.
much community unless you go to church. And I think that's the one place where there's some built-in community. But I think we're really selling ourselves short. I think that it'd be better if we had the simpler life. I'd rather give up
Definitely.
the technology.
Yeah, definitely. And while social media is great, we found each other through that, and that's a great
Yeah.
avenue. I think in a lot of ways, social media has really divided us a lot more, um, and not allowed us the interaction, the ability to talk with our neighbors, and to have that fellowship with them, because I think that's a
Yeah.
very lacking thing. One of the things with the pandemic is a lot of people, got out of their house, went for walks in our neighborhood, and we got
Hmm.
a chance to know our neighbors in a
Oh,
way
that's
we hadn't
cool.
before. And I think, you see people are like, "Oh, how long have you been here?" And they don't. I've been here for 15 years. Like, I've never seen you before. But that's
Wow.
a great thing about the pandemic. You look at the
Yeah.
bad thing, but also a lot of people got a chance to come together, and to know each other. And yeah, for me, that's been great. I've got a chance to know quite a number of people on my street, know about their lives, talk with them on, walks outside, and get a chance to know everything about them. And I would never get that if they
Yeah.
weren't all pent up inside, and have a need to go out and do that. You probably would just pass each other in driving. So I think there are some great things that have come out of this pandemic, and hopefully there's more positives that come out of kind of the last 2 years, and maybe people will reevaluate what's
Yeah.
important in their life.
I agree. I think that's this opportunity to have a reset button, and for us to really take a look at what's important. Not everyone's going to do it, but I think for those who have, it has been life changing. I know it has been for me. And I really did get down to kind of the bare bones of things. And I found that I'm a lot happier and I can give more of myself to each one of the things that I found to be super important.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, let's get on to actually your interview, but all of this is part of it though. I think, just a good conversation between friends is sometimes what we all need, and that kind of proves the point of community. I like to start at the beginning, so I always ask people to do just that. And I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Certainly. So, I grew up in a middle class family. My parents were kind of the high school sweethearts. I was kind of the cautionary tale of,
Mm.
of high school pregnancy. So I always joke about that. In fact, a lot of the teachers, when I ended up going to school later on in that same town, would pull me aside and say, "Oh, I remember when your mom and dad were here." And I was like, "I'm sure you did. I'm sure everybody did." But my dad joined the military. He was in the Marine Corps, um, and he worked blue collar. He's been working in heating and air conditioning for a long time, and doing that. So very blue collar, hard work ethic that I've kind of always been ingrained and grown up with, and that's kind
Hmm.
of been the foundation for a lot of who I am. Um, but growing up, I had a couple of sisters, but it was also a lot of ups and downs. My parents, unfortunately, divorced when I was young, and it was very difficult for me during that time because there was no stability. There
Mm,
was things that were constantly going in and out, and as a kid, you often get caught in these um, issues that happen between adults, and you see
yeah.
all the inner workings, and it reflected. It was very hard growing up to have that,
Hmm.
and for a little part of that, my mom had gotten involved in drugs and some other things, and started to make down a different path.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was very difficult to see that, to have her kind of in and out of my life, and to have some of the things that happened at that point. It really kind of molded me and changed kind of who I am. Um, and it definitely was not um, a completely stable environment, but I know that like my dad worked very hard growing up
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
spite of that to overcome that. So that's one thing I always saw was his work ethic to overcome adversity. Like even when things were bad or
Yeah.
things were tough, like he would work so hard. So for us, I grew up where I just saw a lot of the adversity in my life. Um, and there are days I got through it, and there's days it was really hard.
Yeah.
But it also kind of let me know what I do and don't want to do later on in my life.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so and I was very thankful for everything that I had at the same time. But when you're in those homes, when you're dealing with all these kinds of things with your parents, and it's they say broken home. I mean, I don't really like the term broken home. I just think it's just a different home. It's a different setting. It's a
Yeah.
different upbringing.
Yeah.
Um, it definitely presented quite a bit of challenges, and but things that I was able to overcome later on in life and get through. But overall, I think that my childhood was certainly, and growing up was certainly something that I was very happy with. A lot of times, I grew up in a time period where um, there was no social media, there was no really computers, so you
Hmm.
kind of just went out and did stuff. Like I was still, I think, the last generation of go
Yeah.
out and get your knees scraped up, stay out
Yep.
till
Yep.
the lights came on, and I think that is the last generation, ironically, of doing that. And I look at a lot of kids now, and they have no socialization.
Hmm.
They don't know what it's like to have that imagination, and I
Yeah.
love that part of my childhood, and I had a lot of,
Absolutely.
and I think that's
Absolutely.
lacking. Like there's
It
times I just want to
is.
give a kid a rotary phone and be like, all right, this is what you
Yeah.
need to use if you want to make a phone call. Um,
Oh my gosh,
what
I
it's
don't,
like
the
to use a
kids
word.
don't even have vitamin D anymore. They're never outside.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's I had to argue.
My mom used to ring a bell. We would be, miles away. I live in an old farmhouse and there was this big old bell and you could hear it for like up to 5 miles. And she'd just ring the bell when it was time for dinner and we come running home.
That's right. I mean, my dad knew I was at like three spots,
Yep.
and it was playing typically outside unless it was downpouring.
Yeah.
So you could always find me. So I come home, and that was it. Like you'd go home, you'd have your thing, and I think it's just funny seeing the generational changes, but it really
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
final stage of that. And I'm hoping that I could bring my son back to that because I had
You
so much
can.
fun
You
growing
can.
up, and I think that's an important thing that we've lacked,
Yeah.
and we've allowed TV and video games
Yeah.
and social media to raise our kids and be
Yeah.
influenced by people that aren't always good people, aren't
Yeah.
always the best examples. And I think that we really need to get back to that, have more faith based, have more of an impact on our kids,
Hmm.
and show them the importance of what you have, being thankful for those things because there are a lot of people out there that don't have that. And I
That's
think a
right.
lot of the kids now, they don't appreciate it. They don't know what it's like to have to work so hard to get some things in life. And
That's right.
it's sad. It is sad.
It is sad. And you will raise your son that way. I raised my kids that way, and it is possible within this crazy world to still give the same values that you held dear and that you realized were valuable. and are worth passing on. So just go against the grain, and he will grow up to thank you. Now, I'm so sorry that was your experience with your mom. You had told me in our pre-recording call that when you were about 12, she left. And I mean, I can't even imagine at that age, knowing that she was into drugs, having her leave. Like, what were you feeling? It must have been a really confusing time.
It was very hard at that point because I think when you're that young, you don't realize what's really happening until you get much older, and then you look back, you go,
Yeah,
"Oh, that's what was happening." Because now you're an adult, you've
yeah,
seen the things, and I think you just process it and look at it in a completely different manner.
hmm,
It was definitely very hard because when I grew up, I said up until probably 10, my mom and my parents were my world. My grandparents, they were very, both sides are intricate, and then when you go through divorce, it's almost like everybody has to pick a side. And for
yeah,
me, it's the same thing. Like, your parents don't get along, so you have to pick a side. And whether
yeah,
they realize it or not, they're forcing you to kind of take a side in some
yeah,
capacity. My mom leaving was difficult. And again, the last time that I saw her, when I was 15 years old,
mm,
until she passed away a few years later at 40.
wow,
So for me, I never got the chance to really mend those fences to get those answers. And I think that really ate at me for a long time.
yeah,
And I think if I look back, there's probably just some things that they just made some bad mistakes that she wished she could get back.
yeah,
Um, and maybe if she had gone down a different path or met the right people or just made certain decisions better,
yeah,
um, she'd be here today and I'd be able to have a good relationship with her, to be able to move forward because, Jesus talks about forgiveness. I mean, the entire
absolutely.
Bible is about forgiveness.
Yeah,
And, if there's one single thing you can't take away from that, it's about forgiveness. And I think that's often the hardest thing to do because for me, I held that bitterness
yeah,
for years to the point where it ate me alive. Like
I bet.
it, it got to the point where I felt guilty even thinking about forgiving my mom for what she did because I thought I was betraying my own dad by
Oh,
like
wow.
doing that. And I
Yeah,
don't think he ever wanted that, but I think in my mind I thought, well, my dad, was there. He raised me while things were difficult at times and there's a lot
hmm,
of other things that are going on. He stood by me. And
yeah,
so you have that philosophy of like, well, I got to stand by him. And now I look at it and say, I'm done allowing that stuff to happen. I'm done letting that bitterness and that resentment, wash over me. And I think
hmm,
now I look at things a little bit differently where I don't want those things to affect, my family, my son.
yeah,
I know that sometimes I'm going to have to be the bigger person and I'm going to have to bite my lip because I know how important it was to have
hmm,
family involved in your life. And when I
yeah,
had my family all there, like I felt all this love and I felt such an amazing, fun childhood. And then when that kind of gets divided up
yeah,
and you don't have all that and you lose those people and you're not sure what's happening, you're a kid, like you don't know what's going on, and your
no,
parents telling you one thing, someone's telling you another. You never get the whole story. And for me, like I never really did get the whole story, and I don't care anymore.
mm,
I'm past it. I've found forgiveness after she's passed. I wish I could have just told her at least once that I forgive you and I love you.
yeah.
I'll never get a chance to do that, and I think that's something that I try to make sure that I highlight now is that I forgive the people. Like I get mad and I forgive them and I move on because I know that that's what will help them. It'll help me, and it's what God teaches us to forgive. The people
That's
that
right.
have
That's
slighted
right.
us.
Let's put a pin
They,
right there, because like
it,
I'm so sorry you didn't get to say it to her, but it's not wasted because you learned the lesson from it, and you learned how to let go of the bitterness, and you learned how to not have it moving forward. And I'm so sorry for your loss, and that must have been something that it's just got to be inexplainable, not to have been able to reconcile with one of your parents before they pass away, and to understand now that you would have liked to, but you didn't. You could have just stayed bitter, and you could still not forgive people, but you made a choice. So let's look at that. That's, I think in life we have so many choices that we can make. And it's really easy to justify bitterness, and people do it for their entire life, but you chose differently.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I feel like that it's an honor to that relationship with your mom to show how much you matured. And you know what? Our parents, they're people with their own traumas. They bring their own stuff in. They have, problems between each other, problems that they have with their families, and it all kind of comes together and trickles down. And some of us make it and some of us don't. And I'm so sorry that you didn't have a childhood with both parents around all the time, but it sounds like your dad did a really excellent job.
Yeah, I mean, he really stepped up, and and again, it goes back to breaking that trend that happens.
Yeah.
He had a falling out with his dad shortly after, a few years after I was born. Um,
Hmm.
my grandfather passed away, ironically, in his early 40s. Um, and he never got to say goodbye to him. He
Mm.
regretted that. And I watched him for years, how he had that regret of
Yeah.
he never got to like rekindle that relationship. Um, and I think it aided him for a long time. And I think a lot of times he tried not to perpetuate the same things, even though it still happened. And it's, for us, it's for me, it's a generational thing. Is trying to identify those things that he went through, I went through that was bad, and
Yeah.
actively working at not doing that now, because you have to continue to work so hard to break that trend, because it is important to have that stability in someone's life and understand that, and not continue that trend just because this happened to me, or because my mom did drugs or my dad was an alcoholic or whatever. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it has to be you. Like, God can work through you and make you a leader and make you a person that is not a follower, and give you the strength to say, I'm not going to let this happen to me. I'm not going to let this be an excuse.
That's
And I
right.
think a lot of people just say, well, it happened to me, so I'm going to let it happen to somebody else, or
Hmm.
this is my excuse. And I just never believed in that. I've never believed that just because something bad happened to you, or someone else was raised in the same way or had a bad upbringing, that you can't overcome that. And I think that's what God puts in front of us, is to overcome. And when
Yeah.
you overcome that, you get those rewards, and there's a feeling of accomplishment that you don't get anywhere else when you overcome that adversity.
I agree. And, we've had trauma. I had trauma in my childhood. I have a now ex-husband who became an alcoholic. He was self-medicating mental health issues. And, my kids have chosen never to drink or do a drug. And, we've made choices to forgive, but also to have good, healthy boundaries, and not to necessarily forget, but to forgive and to work on our own hearts. And that's what I hear with you. You can't ever really do anything about what someone else is going to do, but you can make sure that you're right. And honestly, so many places in the Bible, it tells us that we're supposed to do whatever it is that we're able to do in order to have peace with everyone. And we're supposed to work on our heart and our relationship with God. And if we do that, he'll take care of everything else. And the ways he tells us to live are ways that are so much higher than what we would choose. And they are those healthy, good ways that are going to keep us, strong and at peace and able to become leaders and able to share things with the next generation and all the things you're talking about. Now, your sister, though, you said your sister followed the same path as your mom. And I think that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and my sister Sarah, she's kind of the middle child, so you have the middle child syndrome
Hmm.
that everyone talks about. But she went through a kind of a very bad path, eh, with a lot of things, lying, manipulation.
Mm.
Um, you know, eh, in high school she stole a car and drove to like Georgia,
Oh,
and after having to like go with my uncle and dad and drive all the way down from Connecticut to Georgia. Um, and having to pick her up because she went on a couple-day joyride, and my dad had no clue where she was
Wow.
at. My dad
Wow.
was at this point in his 30s, and he literally went white overnight. And like you talk about like the Moses white, I woke up one morning and he was white. And I swear to God, like
Oh,
that's how much stress plays a role into that. So
oh my
you're
gosh.
dealing with a teenage daughter who's going through all that. And, she decided to link back up with my mom.
Uh-huh.
And, she followed, unfortunately, a bad path. I haven't seen my sister since I was 15. I'm
Wow.
now 41. Unfortunately, she's just continued to make bad decisions. I
Yeah.
wish her well. I forgive her. I hope that she finds God. I hope that she changes her ways and one day we can be together. But unfortunately, like I also can't let people in my life that are gonna manipulate and use and be a bad influence either. Like I
That's
can
right.
pray for them
That's
and
right.
I can pray for forgiveness and I can pray for them to find a good path and to heal, but at the same time, like they have to make those choices too. Um, and so yeah, to see her go down that path was hard. Um, and it's just sometimes your siblings you go different ways. And it's funny is that
Yeah.
you know we all go through different paths. We all have different upbringings, and
Hmm.
no two people follow the same path. And
That's
with our
right.
family, my family was this. It was like that. My siblings went in different paths, and unfortunately, some of them didn't go down the right path. Others did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely hard because I just felt like somebody who left out of her life, she wanted to get back in, and why she went down that path, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's teenage stuff, maybe that's what people do, but I never felt that way. Maybe because I'm a guy and like I just feared my dad, and I was one of those people that was like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if I do
Yeah.
anything, so I don't think I ever had a lot of those things cross the mind. And I think for me as a kid, I
Yeah.
was pretty. I'm not gonna say I was like saintly, but I was pretty. As far as teenagers go, I think I was very low maintenance. When it comes to trouble, and if anything there was happened, I don't think my dad ever found out about it. Like I was
Yeah.
very low key with stuff, because I know like he already had teenage daughters or a teenage daughter. He had enough to deal with at that point. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, people unfortunately follow
Well,
different paths, and it is what it is.
well, you're saying them basically the same thing. You forgive them, you pray for them, you put down the boundaries if they're not showing any signs of actually being in active recovery and having a sober life. And that's what I've had to do too. And you've got to learn to love the person. You don't have to love the behavior, and pretty much, praying for somebody is loving them, and having a healthy boundary is loving them too, because you're not allowing them in to affect your relationship and the rest of your family. And then hopefully one day, honestly, I didn't ask this before, and you don't have to give me her name now. You can give it to me, off air. But I would love to be praying for your sister, because I understand. My ex-husband, it was quite a horrible journey, and then my stepson, his son, ended up committing suicide because he got caught in the same thing, and so it can be a horrible thing. So I'd love to pray for her.
I appreciate that, and I'm so sorry to hear about him. I know
Yeah,
that's tragic to hear that. I've had, unfortunately, friends and stuff who have taken their own life, and
yeah,
it's twice as bad for the people they leave behind because
it
there's so
is.
much guilt, there's so much what could I have done, there's so much everything. But I
Yeah,
appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. Now, adversity seems to be this theme in your life. And when we talked, would you say adversity has been like the center point? And what do you think it's produced in you?
It's definitely been a center point. I've joked about it, and I think we talked a little bit about it with in the pre-call, the pre-screen. Um, my wife and I, like, oh, it's almost like we thrive when there's
Yeah,
the most adversity. Um, it it's been hard in a lot of ways, but as I get older as a man, I realize the adversity is there for a reason, and
hmm,
it's almost like at times I welcome it, even if it's subconsciously,
yeah,
because I know that it sharpens me as a person. it allows me to overcome a lot of things and be prepared to be able to support others as well. You know, the
Hmm.
adversity that my family's going through. Well, I've been so used to living in adverse times and tumultuous times and having to overcome physical, emotional, or both throughout, since I was small to a grown man. It's allowed me the ability to look at a situation and go, yeah, not a big deal in comparison. Where other
Right,
people would be like freaking out. And I
right,
think
right.
that's helped out at certain points in my life. God put that because he knew that at some point I was going to need to be the rock, or I would need to be in a trying
Yeah,
situation. And in comparison, that would help me. And it's given me
yeah.
the tools. Like, not that I wish that on everybody to have so much adversity. There are days I say to God, you know what, if you could just be a little bit less on the adversity, like, don't be heavy on the seasoning. This year, like, could be the year where it's like nothing happens, nothing
Yeah,
crazy. I just need a chill year, if you would.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but I don't think he's answered my prayers, because I've been praying that, and then COVID hit and other things hit.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that
But
he hears the prayers now.
Adam, like it came in so handy, I'm sure, in the military, and you've grown into such a leader type personality. As we'll talk in a little bit, I believe that you're the kind of person that can pour into other people, and you're willing to just step out there. A lot of people are afraid to step out of their comfort zone, and I don't know that you have one anymore, and that's a good thing, that you're willing to do whatever it takes. And I've become that kind of person. I was not that kind of person most of my life, but now, God has asked me to do so many crazy things, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. That at this point, I just, like, they've all worked out, so I trust that he'll figure it out for me. But I think it's really important that you can just go for it, because so many people will sit on the sidelines or never stand up. They don't even stand up. They don't even think about going and doing something. They just let life happen. And, I think there's something to be said for making the most of it and doing your best. And that's what I see in you. Now, when you joined the military, you said that everything in your life seemed to shift in a good way. Could you
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So obviously, as we kind of talked about earlier, growing up in early years and teenage years, it was a very back and forth life.
Mhm.
Not a lot of stability in the home life, just due to a variety of reasons. There was just a lot of that. The military allowed me the ability to find purpose, find a direction, and in a way, hit the reset button in my life. Allowed me
Mhm.
to be able to say, you know what, I was this unsure person before that had a lot of things going on, and I was dealing with a lot of hard times in my life and pain. It allowed me to just reset and say, you know what, you're going to come here with people you've never met. You're going to get an opportunity to meet people from all walks of life, get a different perspective.
Mhm.
And it molded me to become somebody that I never thought that I would be. It's allowed me to be somebody who has been a leader of men and women, who has been somebody who has been all over the world. When
Yeah.
I left home, I never thought I'd ever leave Connecticut, and now I'm 41, and I've been to the pyramids of Egypt. I've been on the Red Sea. I've been in Israel, in the
Mhm.
Holy Land. I've been in the DMZ in South Korea, literally looking into North Korea. I've been to Afghanistan, Iraq. I've been to all these countries and places around the world and all around the U.S. And God's blessed me with the ability to see that. And I never would have got
Yeah.
a chance to see that if I'd have just stayed here. So I think,
Mhm.
again, that adversity and pushing another path that I was very unsure of, was a big part of God's plan, because I didn't think I was going to join the military. I was very awkward. When I went in the military, I was 6'1", 140 pounds soaking wet.
Oh,
So
wow.
about as yeah, I was not like your prototypical athlete coming out running whatever, but I
Right.
learned to be physical. I learned to have confidence. And I was blessed to meet so many amazing people in my life that impacted me, and I made lifelong friends that the military friends that you have are just completely different than a civilian. Um,
Yeah.
it's just a completely different lifestyle idea, and you see each other as, I believe, we are all meant to be seen. The
Mhm.
military, I think, is the biggest example of how we all should live, because it is filled with people from all walks of life, and you don't care about the race, the color, the sex,
Yeah.
the religion. You don't talk about that. You don't even really see it. You just see as a man and a woman who wants to stand up for their country, to
Hmm.
serve, and is somebody that has your back. And if they have your back, you have theirs, and it literally is in the palm of your hand. So there's
Yeah.
that trust in a complete stranger that you're never going to have anywhere else. And I've had that. I've had literally times where my life was in someone's hands, because if I didn't do my job and they didn't do their job, we wouldn't make it out of there. And
Yeah.
um, it's been a blessing. I will say it's not for everybody. I'm not one of those people that says everybody should join the military.
Hmm.
I think that it's good for a lot of people, whether they
Yeah.
realize it or not. But there's are some people that it's just not made for. But God put it in my path. He allowed me to pay for my college. I have allowed me to see the world. It allowed me so many things that I look back and I'm so thankful for, because it's allowed me to understand just the human experience from so many different perspectives. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm really thankful for that, because as we were talking about earlier, seeing some of these countries and places, I always go back when I talk to somebody, it's like, you have no clue how good you have it here, even if you're poor in this
Yeah.
country, in
Yeah.
comparison to these other countries and where they're living. And I'm so thankful. That's why I don't take anything for granted. I don't take I don't take breaks, because I know how it's important to work hard, because I'm afforded this opportunity, so I don't want to waste it. I don't want
Yeah.
to waste this opportunity that God's given me, and this life, by just sitting back on the sidelines and not doing anything.
And I can hear
Because
that. And I know, I mean, you're doing so much. When we get into it, you've written a book, you're pouring into other people, you've set up these platforms, you're doing so many different things to help others. And, I hear it in you, and we don't know how much time we're going to have, and we should not waste it for sure. And I don't want us to move on without thanking you though for your service. I have a son-in-law who was in the military as well as my own dad, and so I think I really appreciate from knowing them the freedoms that I do have here, and I try to live an exemplary life of integrity and give back as my way of saying thank you for what you guys have done. And I'll never truly be able to understand it, but I know from some of the stories it's quite a sacrifice, and so I'm so grateful. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I know we had talked before, and you said sometimes it's a weird thing to say thank you to. Somebody says
It
thank you,
really
and
is.
yeah,
It's I guess for a lot of veterans, it's a hard thing, because they look at it from a different perspective, and they're not,
hmm,
they're happy to do it, but it's a very humbling thing when people say that. And to this day, I still get weirded out. Like, I appreciate it, but it's still weird for somebody to thank you for your service, because
yeah,
I don't expect them to thank me. Like, it's not why I do it. And I think that people that do things for ulterior motives and tout what they
yes,
are, whether, oh,
yes,
I'm a doctor, or I'm this, or I'm that, like, for
yeah.
praise. I can't get behind that.
Right, but I'm not saying thank you because you expect it. I'm saying
I know.
thank you because I actually really appreciate it and realize that, I mean, look around, look at what's going on right now in the world. I realize the kind of world that I could live in right now, the kind of place the United States could be. And um, I would imagine it is weird, that would be like somebody coming up and thanking me for reading the Bible every day and doing a podcast. Like, oh, okay, sure. But I know you wanted to do it, and I know you're happy to do it, but I do really appreciate it. And I know that another thing that I thought was so amazing that God did was you're a Christian now, but you had told me that your faith really became your own when you were in the military.
Yeah, yeah, and as we kind of talked about, when I was in Iraq, um, back in '09, '08, '09, actually '07, '08.
Hmm.
I was there, and I was supporting a friend. She would go to church. Ironically, the church that we had was a blown out building, so very. It definitely looked like a church that you might have 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but yeah, I mean, there was missing walls and things on that. So, um, but I would go there, and I had a chaplain who was a Baptist, and he would preach, and he would talk, and we would get more involved and get involved in Bible study and just getting to a better relationship, and that's where I really found my faith there a lot more. I'd always believed, but I think that not to that extent, and I didn't have that moment where I asked and talked to God and listened to him in the same way. And
Hmm.
I could definitely feel his presence more there. Um, and ironically, it wasn't even in the worst of combat. Like when I was in Afghanistan, the combat was far worse. And
Hmm.
typically so many people find faith in those moments. I found it in a less combat environment, ironically being in Iraq, but um, it was an amazing experience. And again, it's all part of God's plan, putting certain people in
Yeah,
your life,
that's
people that
right.
you meet and you talk to and you support them. And that's how God introduces so many things into us. And he gives us that choice. And those little things that happen, led me
Hmm.
to have a stronger relationship with him, to look at things from a completely different perspective, to be a better man, and at least try to be a better man every day,
Yeah.
to understand that I am going to sin, I am going to fall,
Hmm.
and I have to ask for his forgiveness, and I have to mean it. I
Yeah.
can't just say, please forgive me, and I don't mean it.
Yeah.
So it was a big part of it. And, to this day, um, you know, that's a big part of my life and a big moment in my life, because I found him in a way that I had not found him before, or had him in my life before.
Hmm.
And ironic, a few years ago, my dad also found him, and he's had an amazing relationship with Christ. He is
Wow.
so involved in his church. Like right now, he's thinking about doing missionary work and going other places. And
That's
this is a man,
amazing.
yeah, and this is a guy who, like, growing up, like, he was a Catholic, he was whatever, but to
Hmm.
see the change in him from what
Hmm.
I knew as a child and even later on in life to what he is now, it's the clearest image of, like, how God works in our hearts, because the man he is now is
Hmm.
completely different from the man he was then, and his heart is so full, and he talking about Jesus and talking about the Bible, he gets excited. And I
Yeah.
never would have thought that about my dad, like, and to see him now, it's
That's
amazing. And
amazing. That's amazing.
it's
I
great
love
that we can
that.
share those things and talk about them.
Yes, yes. I wish I could share Christ with all of my family. There's a remnant in our family who believe, but not everyone does, and a lot of them look at me like I'm the crazy five-headed lady because all I ever do is talk about Jesus. And like on public forums, I write books and I do podcasts, and I've gotten up on stages, and they just don't understand. But I can't stop talking about him, so um that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Now, here's the thing. When we were talking our pre-recording call, you told me that once you realized that you were going to have a child, you ended up getting married. You decided to retire, and I love that. You said you knew that active duty would be tricky for having a family, and you wanted to be present and dependable as a parent. And I love that choice. I think you looked back to not having exactly the childhood that you would have chosen, and you wanted to give your very best to your child. What do you think the strength to just stop what you had already really gotten involved in and known and loved, and make that choice came from?
You know, I think it came from God just putting it on my heart that it was time, and to say, listen, you dedicated 20 years of your life to this cause. You've helped people. Um, it's been an important part of my life, and it's been an important part to be able to help other people. But
Hmm.
now's the time to refocus your life for other purposes that he has.
Yeah.
Um, which is kind of where I feel like I'm at right now. And I also just knew, like, seeing all of the divorces, the unfortunately the things that happen in the military, it's such a
Hmm.
hard life for any family. And I wanted to change every aspect of what I looked at as growing up as like a bad thing, something that I wanted to change and do completely different. And
Hmm.
I feel like I've done a lot of that. You know, my dad had me at 18. I
Yeah.
didn't have my son until I was 38. So
Wow.
when you look at the spectrum, like maybe I would have had him a little sooner if God's will, it would be a little bit great. But I looked at it and said, I'm going to make some changes and I'm going to do things differently. And making those changes has allowed me to be on other paths that I was meant to
Hmm.
be able to get educated, to be the first person in my family to go to college. Um, all the
Awesome.
things that I wanted to set up for myself and
Yeah.
to be a good example. So then when my son was here, I was established and set up because I know that like growing up, that's got to be hard being like 18, 19 years old and having a family and trying to figure all that stuff out.
Yeah.
I wanted to just be established, ready, be able to focus 100% on his growth, his development, and be present. And I knew that those were the things that I wanted to be, and that there were going to be hard days, but I wanted to be that parent that was present as much as humanly possible. So at the end of the day, when he's all grown up, I could say, you know, God, I did my best. I gave him
Hmm.
as much as I can and guidance and mentorship. And now it's up to him to grow up to be a man, to do good things in your name, to be a good person. And I hope that does have that impact. So yeah, I mean, I gave up the military, but at the same time, I knew it was time to move on.
Hmm.
Um, and I think God just took that out of me and said, you know what? I'm going to fill it with this little, you know, 2-year-old boy or 1-year-old boy, and I'm going to
Yeah.
give you a different path that you're not even aware that you're going to take. And it's amazing what he does. He puts us on paths that we're not sure we're going to take, but I've always been a person that's okay with being outside of my comfort zone, being a bit of a renaissance person. Um,
Hmm.
I like that. I like the ability sometimes to do something I've never done or thought I would do before,
Yeah.
and the fun and the scariness that comes along with that.
Well, it's a good thing that you did kind of craft yourself and learn how to be a man of integrity and learn how to not have a comfort zone and learn to be a leader, because you didn't have what I would call an ordinary experience once your wife was pregnant. Now, would you tell us a little bit about your wife's pregnancy story, what that time was like for you? I mean, when you tell me that at 24 weeks, 25 weeks, you were looking at having a child already, it just blows my mind. So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, so my we had gone through. My wife suffers from PKD, which is a polycystic kidney disease.
Hmm.
And as we talked about in our pre-call, she's actually just celebrating just over 6 months of getting a kidney transplant. So
Awesome.
she had gotten a kidney transplant, and a lot of that was due to her condition, but complications
Hmm.
from the birth of our son.
Hmm.
We had actually gone through in vitro. We had gone through a number of iterations that just didn't take, so there was that loss, uh,
Hmm.
that difficulty to go through that. And anybody who's been through in vitro, it's emotionally and physically taxing on the mom, especially.
I
Um,
bet.
yeah, and so we had our son was tracking along, and then there was a time period where he just started to fall behind.
Yeah.
Um, he wasn't tracking ahead where he would be at his time, and it was so hard. And at about 22 weeks, my wife was at the hospital for a week,
Hmm.
um, and she got out. Then she went back in for a checkup, and the doctor said, he's not tracking ahead of schedule. We may want to think about abortion. And
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't believe it that this doctor, and it's a female doctor, not a male doctor, had said that. It sent my wife
Wow.
into a panic, and she had to be committed to the hospital because she was so stressed out.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. I bet. I mean, come on.
and I in hindsight, you look back and you say the doctor's trying to set expectations, but in that moment, you're like, I hate you so much for saying that, suggesting that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you are a horrible, horrible person.
Yeah.
But we kept her in the hospital, and our goal was to get to 28 weeks.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of the good viability rate where you have such like a 90% success rate or 80%
Hmm.
survival. Um, Unfortunately, he only made it a few more days, and he
Wow.
was born at 25 weeks old at
Wow.
1 pound 4 ounces.
Oh my
So
gosh. I mean, just stop a second. How
yeah,
much? Oh my gosh, that's so tiny.
I mean, when
Oh,
you think about it, it's a little bit more than a probably your average bag of chips, the weight. And when he was 10.5 inches long, so he's probably, less than
oh,
your foot size when you look down at the
wow.
baby's born. And,
That's incredible.
and you think I was born at 5 pounds at 18 inches long.
Right.
So the comparison in
Wait
size
a
when you
minute,
think,
you're like 6'1" and you were born at 5.
oh
I'm
yeah,
5. I'm I'm
I was
5'1" and I was huge.
that's how it is. My sister is 5'1" and she was born almost like 8.5, 9 pounds. It's like that's how it is in my family. If you're
Yeah.
small,
Yeah.
my son will probably be 8 feet tall
Yeah.
at the rate.
Yeah.
But
Wow, that's
yeah,
crazy.
he it was a crazy day. Um, you don't know what to expect. You don't know
Hmm.
what a preemie is.
Hmm.
You don't have any clue. And
Right.
I just felt so bad for my wife. Um, I remember the first time I saw him, we talked about it on our call a little bit. I felt so much guilt because I thought if I see my son right when he's born and these got doctors are keeping him alive and all these machines, if he passes away
Mm.
20 minutes later,
Hmm.
she never gets to see him alive. And the guilt that would be that she went through all of that,
Yeah.
the processes and the injections and the praying to get to that point, and that I only got to see him.
Wow.
Um, that kind of ate at me, like it did. And I
Yeah.
was so nervous until she finally got to see him because I kept thinking like, how unfair is that?
Yeah.
And I almost didn't want to see him because I didn't want to take that away from her. And if she wasn't going to have it, then I wasn't going to have it. But I also wanted to, be there and be supportive. So
Wow.
um, it was definitely a difficult journey. We spent 135 days there,
That's
and
so long.
yeah, so
135 days. Wow. That's
we came
amazing. I mean, what'd
we
you
came home
do?
about a month after we were there every day,
Right.
um, 10 to 12 hours a day.
Right.
Um, there were just days where it was so hard because he had so many different machines.
Hmm.
Um, you're trying to stay positive, you're trying to stay upbeat, you're trying to do everything you can. And as a parent, you feel like you don't have any control because as a dad, I can't protect him. I
Yeah.
can't will and say to God, take me. And there
Hmm.
were times where I begged God in the chapel and I begged by his bedside to take all the pain and put it into me or take my life. I negotiated so many times with God, and
Wow.
that's how it works. And we all know that. But when you're seeing your small child and you just want them to have life
Yeah.
in that moment, I would have given anything for him. And I still say to God every day, thank you for giving me another day with him. Because if God says tomorrow, you know what, Adam, you made those promises.
Hmm.
It's your time to go. I'm thankful for having the time I had because I would have given anything for him to live. And he's been able to live now for almost 4 years.
Wow.
And we're blessed because there were times where we didn't think he was going to live. Um,
Yeah. That's powerful that you were willing to literally give up your own life. That's powerful.
and I think a lot of parents are like that. There was an old adage for families in the NICU that, you know, the halls of the NICU have seen more tears than most churches and heard
Yeah.
more prayers than most churches because everybody
Yeah.
there is praying and you have people praying all over. And I had my dad, his church, my uncles, everybody's church that we knew was
Hmm.
praying and praying and praying and uplifting. And it helped so much, but at the same time, like, you're going through a literal living hell every day because you're
Yeah,
having to be there, and
yeah.
every
I
day is different.
can't imagine what that's like. I mean, my gosh. Now you made it through. You got home, and I'm sure even when you got home, there was still it wasn't normal.
Oh no, I mean, and I think
Yeah,
that's the biggest misconception for a lot of parents that are in the NICU is that everyone assumes you gain the weight, you have a
yeah,
premature child, and that's it.
yeah.
No, he came home. He was on oxygen, so we had to learn how to have oxygen. He was on a feeding
Hmm.
tube, so we had a G tube to get his feeds. Um,
Wow.
he had cranial helmets. He had doctor's appointments. I mean, we had a pulse ox that was hooked up to his oxygen, so it
Hmm.
would constantly go off. So we basically brought the NICU home with
To
us.
your house.
It,
Yeah. Wow.
it wasn't like we got him home and we're just picking him up. Like he still had wires, he still had things attached to him almost at all times for the first few months. So yeah, you're not in the NICU, but now it's all on you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one else to support you. Um, you're in the middle of dead of winter, so you don't want anybody coming to your home because they could have a cold. And
Yeah.
these are what all the parents go through right now. There's a family that's right now going through that. They're getting their kid home, they're excited, but now they're going through the I'm alone and I have to do this alone because I want to keep my baby alive. And
Yeah.
it's very, very isolating and it's very hard, but we got through it. And, my wife, as I talked about, we overcame the adversity.
Yeah.
We formed almost like a perfect team that was um, hearing each other's thoughts,
Hmm.
anticipating each other's thoughts. It was well oiled, if anything, and I think that helped quite a bit get through it. Is that we just
Yeah.
focused on the task at hand
Yeah.
and getting him to that next day. That was it.
Well, plus you weren't bearing it all yourself. I mean, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. My son came with me to take care of my parents. We're taking care of them. We've been isolated to try to keep them safe, kind of very
Hmm.
similar, but on the other end. And it's a weird experience. It's weird not to be able to have the life you had before, but you certainly value this life and you're the one in charge of caring for it, but it is helpful to have a team. If I had to do everything by myself and he wasn't here, I don't really know what I would do. It's not that I couldn't find a way to do it, but I think it's helpful just to know you're in it with somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. That's wow. So now a lot of people, their focus would be, to get through all of this, and then they get to the point where their child is healthy and doing well, and that's that. They made it, right? But not you. You're an encourager and you're somebody that really felt all that you went through. You ended up writing a book and you started a platform. Will you tell us about that and why? Like, what did you want to achieve?
Well, one of the things about in the NICU is that I saw a lot of things that I wish that I could change, and
Hmm.
you know, um, I read a lot of books and I saw a lot of things, and I just said, there's still a missing piece of this.
Right.
There's still a connection piece that I'm missing. And part of the thing with me is I've always used humor, especially in the military.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes you have to have a very dark sense of humor to get through adversity, and that
Hmm.
has helped me get through so much adversity in my life. Is being able to utilize humor to internalize, to make light of the situation. Not that I don't care, but it's a
Right.
coping mechanism. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
Um, Parents, people that work in healthcare, law enforcement that see kind of the worst part, you kind of have
Yeah.
to develop something like that. So I decided at one point that I wanted to write a book using humor to showcase kind of our experience
Hmm.
and what others go through as well. Because I looked around and I saw some books, but like nothing that highlighted the same way. And I looked at it and I said, how good would it be now that my son's getting better to be able to show that what the experience is like? And
Hmm.
I wanted to write something that I looked at it from the perspective of me a year or two earlier. Like,
Hmm.
what would I have liked to have seen as a brand new parent that is like a preemie parent, has no clue what that means? what would I like to be able to sit there and read and see what would encourage me? And I
Yeah.
looked at it from that perspective. So I started to write this idea of the milestones.
Hmm.
And I decided that it's going to be a book that's going to be funny, but about the celebrations of the amazing things that we get through and the adversity that we overcome and we move towards going home. And the book really talks about all of those little steps along the way that you have to meet and that you celebrate as a parent more than anybody else because it is a milestone.
Yeah.
It's their first bath, it's their first outfit, it's the first time you see them without tape and stuff all over their face.
Yeah.
Um, and I looked at it from that perspective and said, I want this to be something that I would read to my kid in the NICU and
Hmm.
years later and be something that would be a keepsake to look back and say, it wasn't just all bells and alarms and bad days. It was good things too.
Yeah.
And
I think
that,
that's so cool that you did that.
yeah. And, a kid can look at it and say, this is what my experience was like. And
Yeah.
it's bright, it's cheerful. And a parent can look back and take back those hard days. And instead of the day that they had a rough day, they're thinking about the day that they got peed on in the NICU, or
Right.
and again, these are
Yeah.
all things that
Yeah.
happen that these parents go
Yeah.
through. So I looked at it and said, I want to use humor because it's a big part of who I am, and I
Yeah.
think it's an area that hasn't been touched. And I wrote the book, got an amazing illustrator, put it out, and then as I was getting that, I said, the book is great, but I want to create a platform too. So I started doing stuff on Instagram, on Facebook. I called
Hmm.
Preemie Adventures, and I looked at it from the idea of we are all on this adventure together. We are all isolated. We are all over the world, and I started
Yeah.
creating funny content that only parents in the NICU and doctors and nurses would get. And I found
Hmm.
that a lot of people love it. A lot of people that are going through the NICU have messaged me and said, you
Yeah.
know what? Your posts have made me laugh and got me through the NICU. I just got released, or I just thought this. My wife or my daughter just did this, and they share pictures, they share their stories, they share everything, and it's about creating a community that laughs together through the
Yeah.
adversity that we're overcoming, and realizing that the couple in Japan or the couple in Ireland is going through the same thing that the couple in Connecticut's going through, and
That's
that we're
right.
all sharing that same journey. We're all overcoming to it together, and maybe it's a place that you can come to and laugh a little and share the positives versus sharing the worst parts of your life. And that's kind of where I kind of envision this coming and creating platforms and things where families can come together and just find a resource. So I established our website. It's got not only podcasts, it's got charities, resources. It's got families that are doing and have created books and resources and items that are specific to families that are going through that experience. So it's really about creating and continue to create a big positive platform um, that utilizes sharing the positives in life, the upsides of it, and
Hmm.
getting a chance to laugh a little bit when you really just need a laugh. Because I know that when I was there, I had some people that helped me laugh that were this
Yeah.
part of us because they knew I needed a chuckle, I needed something, and I think a lot of people are like that, and this normalizes that ability for them to laugh at their difficult times and to take it back and say, you know what, I'm not going to let this get to me anymore
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get through that. And it's been an amazing couple years, and I'm really hoping that it will grow and become more and more and more and become a nonprofit and allow me to do so many more things.
Oh, it's
And it's
definitely going to. I mean, I love everything about this. And everybody who's listening, we're going to put all the different ways in the show notes for you to get a hold of what Adam is doing and follow what he's doing. Share it with people that you know are going through this. And we're going to do a giveaway with his book around the time of the release of his episode. I just love everything about this. And we're going to put, even if you have other resources that you think would be helpful, send them to me, Adam, and I'll put those in the show notes too, because what you're doing it's not a little thing. It's a big thing. You found the thing that you really got uh, some life from, when people took your mind off of it and let you laugh, and you're doing it now, and you're just creating this beautiful community. I just love it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I think the fact that you want to just keep going, it's just amazing because, some of us go through something, like I said, and we get through it and we're like, whew, I'm done. I got through it. But other people, that becomes kind of their ministry. And that's what I see with you. And um, I love that you're taking all of that. I got through the adversity. I'm a leader type person, and you're pouring it into something positive to help people all around the world. I think it's great. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you if you could give anyone listening who has a child in the NICU right now any advice, what would it be?
Well, the advice I would give is if you're blessed to have a partner that's going through the experience with you, is to communicate. Um, Communicate and be honest with them,
Mm,
because there's going to be a lot of times that you're going to be thinking and going through things, and you internalize it and say, I don't want to say this, or I don't want to feel this, or I don't want to share this because I don't want to put more weight on someone else's chest. And
mm,
I found that a lot of men become very stoic, and it often comes off as they don't care.
yeah.
And their significant others like, well, he doesn't care because he didn't say anything, but inside he's hurting. So
Hmm.
I would say communicate. Let them know that there are going to be days, and sit there and say, I need you to be the strong one today.
Yeah.
And God, that's hard for us to do. But
Hmm.
there might be a day where you just want your wife or you just want your husband to take care of everything. And when they know that that's what they need to do, that's what their focus needs to be, you
Hmm.
could focus on the baby or what you need to do, and they could focus on that. Um, and I think the other part would be as involved as you humanly can. Um, the interaction, the contact that you have, the holds, the reading to them while you're there, the touch,
Hmm.
all of those things impact in a way you can't imagine. Um,
Yeah.
very involved in that, and we were very involved in the rounds, the care, the feedback, what was going on.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to be an advocate for your baby, because I know,
Mm,
talking with some friends and some doctors and other people that I know in the community, there
hmm.
are like people culturally that feel like it's disrespectful to ask a doctor questions because they feel
Right.
like you know, it's okay. Be an advocate for your child. It's okay to ask the questions. Feel 100% comfortable. If you don't feel right about something, get some more information, talk about it, because you're going to go through this whole thing and it's going to be a whirlwind, and you've just got to take it one day at a time. Even if it's 1 minute at a time, it's
Hmm.
okay. You just have to get through that. But those are the things I think would are the most beneficial, and understanding that your feelings are legitimate. Like, what you're feeling is okay to feel. Um, it may not be. It may just be for a moment, but it's okay to feel the things that you're feeling. And I think if you're involved and you're putting forth that effort, um,
Hmm.
that you'll end up having a much better result. There's no guarantees,
Yeah.
especially in the NICU. But I think the people that were the most active, that had the most invested, I feel like almost like their child knew that they had something to fight for as well. And I think when we know
Yeah.
that there's something we fight for, our soul, our body fights for it even more. Because I saw that happen with our son, where they're giving me a small percentage chance he lives to the day, and he
Hmm.
overcame it time and time again. And it
Yeah.
just was amazing to see. So I think that you have to give them hope and something to fight for as well. And I think that that help will be helpful.
Yeah. This is all wonderful advice. Totally, totally wisdom. And I normally ask this last question every week. It's my favorite question. I just love the answers. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Younger self advice. Oof.
Hmm.
Well, besides investing in Google and Apple, that I mean, those would definitely be nice, easy things that would make a lot of things easier. Um,
Right, right.
you know, I think I would just tell myself to relax a little bit more,
Hmm.
um, to have a little bit better temperament and not be as quick to be angry. I think a lot the younger me often could have a short fuse at times.
Hmm.
Not to say that the older me doesn't have one from time to time again, but I think a lot of that having the short fuse didn't benefit me in any capacity, and I think a lot of times it ruined dynamics and relationships.
Yeah.
And I think the other part would um, be humble,
Mm.
be humble and thankful in everything, because when you're humble and thankful and you appreciate everything, it, it's a lot better way to live your life. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the you and I think a lot of times we just aren't that. We're not humble. We boast. We do all that stuff. And I think
Hmm.
for me, it's just continuing to find humble, even in success, even when I am successful, is to sit there and say, but I still have much more to do. I'm thankful,
Hmm.
and to be
Hmm.
humble about it. And I think that would be probably some things I would tell myself. Um, because I think my younger self, like overall, I think he was a pretty good person, but I think that he could definitely benefit from a few of those things.
That's awesome. Yeah, if we really could go tell our younger self things, um, it's really tricky because I think there's certain things you just can't learn until you mess up. Like we might not even know the things to tell our younger selves until we didn't do it. But I think that's all really great advice. And Adam, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk with us today. I can't wait to do the book giveaway and to share uh, all the good stuff that you're doing so people can get involved and share with their friends who are going through some of what you went through. And thank you for just not stopping after you got through and becoming this wonderful resource and blessing to other people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's been a great time to talk with you tonight.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I can't wait till we can release your episode, and I hope you have a great day.
You as well.
Thanks.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.